Evening, good afternoon, good morning from wherever you're listening to us today on our webinar for buying in France. I'm Emily Despois. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Fine & Country, and I will be the host for tonight. I am joined by a fantastic panel of experts who are hopefully going to answer all your questions. We have received many questions, so we'll try as usual to go through as many as we can. And the questions that we can't answer, the experts in the background will be emailing you and giving you answers to your questions. So I do apologize if we can't go through all your questions. You will notice there is a chat where you can add any other questions that we will try to go through as well during this session. So please don't hesitate to add some questions into the chat. But without further ado, let's start the presentation of the panel of experts. Liam, do you want to start introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Liam. I'm a French mortgage broker based in Nice, and geographically we cover all of the prime lending locations here in France, which includes Paris, Provence, the Côte d'Azur, and many other spots. And yeah, fun fact, I moved here almost 13 years ago and played rugby for the city of Nice.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's the reason why, when people ask, why did you move to France? It was because I was an egg chaser.
Okay. That's a very good reason. And the name of the company?
Fortier Finance. Sorry.
Fortier Finance. Very good. Thank you very much, Liam. Tom, over to you.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name is Tom Marin. I'm one of the partners at Blevins Franks, based in France, in Valbonne, not far from Nice, about half an hour away. And what Blevins Franks does is we provide strategic tax and financial planning, wealth management for people who are either thinking about becoming French residents, thinking about moving to France, or people who are already living in France. And really our job is to look at their situation and help them to optimize in terms of how they're structuring their assets, their income, to be as tax efficient as possible for the French system. We've been doing this as a company for over 50 years. This year we had our 50th anniversary. The company started in 1975. I haven't been at the company for quite that long. I've been at Blevins Franks for 10 years, and hopefully many more years. And really, if anybody's in a position and is watching this and thinking about becoming French resident, we're really very well placed to help you understand how the French tax system applies to you, and as I say, how you can optimize.
Fantastic. Facts from you.
Oh,
Liam started, so no. Okay. Alice, over to you.
Hi everyone, good evening. So my name is Alice Watson-Smith and I'm the Managing Director of Fine & Country on the French Riviera. We have been operating for 13 years. We're based in Cannes, and with a team of about 18 agents, we cover the whole Côte d'Azur and into Provence. Yeah, but I can't think of a fun fact, I'm sorry to say. Everyone else has had one.
That's all right. Put you on the spot there. Tracy, over to you.
Oh, the stress and the pressure. I have no fun fact. I can introduce myself. My name is Tracy Leonetti. And I think I've been in France now for over 30 years. Actually, it's 33 years. So I think I am probably the longest here. And I moved to France with my then very small child, decided to live here and went through a very tricky process of getting into the system. And that's why I created LBS 15 years ago, because I realized it shouldn't be that complicated. So the role at LBS is what? It's really to help you on moving, living, or having a business in France with a smooth transition. So we help you with everything to do with obviously visas and immigration, but also things like healthcare, carte vitales, driving licenses, car registrations, anything to do with paperwork process, and of course helping with that whole relocation process once you've found your dream home with Alice, of course.
Fantastic. And France, there is a lot of paperwork. So yeah. Johnny, over to you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Hello. I hope you're well. I'm broadcasting from London today, and it's very cold at the moment, so looking forward to hearing about the wonderful French life. Warm me up a bit. I'm a keen skier. I've got plenty of holidays over the years over to France, so yeah, really interested in the country. And in terms of my job, well, I work for Lumon as a payment specialist. We're an international payment specialist. I've been here 15 years. We've been trading for 25 years, helping people moving money in and out of France for French property transactions, but also many other transactions that might be needed for wealth management and other matters. So my fun fact would have to be that I was once on BBC News discussing Brexit with Clive Myrie. And yes, so always keen to mention that to some clients. Quite a long time ago. That's my fun fact for the evening. Thank you.
Oh, I did
Very good.
Brexit. I did France 5 with Brexit on the TV. So in fact, there you go.
There you go. Celebrities all around.
Here you go. And can I say that I'm the French one on the call, and I'm sitting in Birmingham. It's so sad. My life is sad. I should be sitting in France. Anyway, let's go on to the questions then. So let's start with Liam and finance. So when I'm looking for a property, a question that we have is, before viewing properties in France, is pre-approval available?
It's a very good question. It's something which, as a Brit, is very common in the UK, of course. And in the UK, you can have a pre-approve up to 6 months. Here in France, it's not the same system. I mean, what we do is we encourage the agent to introduce the client as soon as possible to get a pre-qualified status from a broker, but not from a bank. So what we can do is we can give an attestation de financement to a client, which essentially can highlight their creditworthiness, their provenance of funds, and confirmation of their mortgage capacity. It's not a mortgage offer, but it's something which can be proudly presented to agents and notaires, because if they have a financial clause, it's important to show they've been vetted and qualified. But in short, from a legal point of view, it's not an offer, but it's a document which shows an independent third party has checked the dossier.
And I mean, it's not the question, but my question would be, is it something that is compulsory when you're putting an offer to a property? No, it's not.
It's not compulsory, but here in France, I've been doing mortgages for almost 10 years. And from what I've found, the best 10% of agents who find their clients the best deals, they're the ones who have the clients who are well prepared. Yeah, essentially, lots of sellers nowadays are very worried that the finance cannot be achieved as a non-resident buyer. So to have a third party, independent and regulated, give this qualification letter, it just shows, that they're in the right, the right ballpark of moving forward.
Okay. And how long does it take to get that letter?
It really depends, it's case by case. I mean, if it's we call it like a vanilla deal, like a salaried employee, straightforward tax returns, that can take 2 weeks. It's not a difficult calculation. For self-employed individuals, business owners, entrepreneurs, that requires a lot of due diligence from a broker, even before we go to a bank, to show their financial readiness, and that can take, again, 2 to 4 weeks. So lots of clients who may or may not have booked their flights yet to come to France and view properties, it's the perfect moment to get in touch, even before they land at Nice airport, to speak to the broker and just make sure their borrowing capacity and their financial planning is in good order.
Okay, and is there a peremption date on that letter?
I mean, it's difficult to say. I mean, I normally put 1 month on there because, of course, you can pre-qualify clients, and a month later they take a mortgage in the UK or the US. But it's essentially dated, and it's based upon the information provided. I mean, speaking to a mortgage broker, it's always in la bonne foi, good faith, that the information they provide to us is clear and accurate.
Great. Anything to add, Alice, from an estate agency point of view to this?
No, just to really back up what Liam said, and he's helped us so many times with clients doing exactly that, giving strength and foundation to the buyer's offer, because it's not a regulation or it's not required necessarily in France, but certainly for sellers, if they have that letter and that confirmation from a third party, it brings strength to the buyer's position, really, and therefore the offer process and the negotiation process. And as Liam said, to help get potentially better deals for the buyer, etc. So we've worked with Liam for many years, exactly in that way, and it's a huge help.
Yeah, I mean, just giving a good example, and this is probably something Alice sees day to day, is, you know, a cash buyer may be able to negotiate a 10% price reduction. And somebody who puts a mortgage clause in, you know, the seller may say, oh, you know, there's a bit of risk on that. I may lose 3 or 4 months with this potential buyer. So again, having that letter it doesn't push you into that cash buyer position, but it gets you as close as possible to it.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Then upon signing an offer and it being accepted by the seller, how long is the process of obtaining a non-resident mortgage in France?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fastest deal I've had from submission of file, which had adequate paperwork, to a mortgage approval was, I believe, 4 weeks. But then again, it's really case by case. If the borrower is buying in a personal name, there's a mandatory 10-day calling off period. So you could have a closing within 7 to 8 weeks by the time it's posted or DHL'd to the recipient and sent back to the bank and finalised. But to get an actual mortgage offer letter, which again is important for a notaire to read and also the agents, typically 4 weeks. And this is where the important part is with the pre-qualification, because if you win 3 or 4 weeks, even before you arrive in France, the moment you've made the offer, there could be a high possibility I've got 90% of the paperwork already. So
okay,
it could be faster.
Great. And what are the key criteria that a French bank will consider when assessing a borrower's affordability and loan capacity?
It's based, I mean, for a non-resident with a local retail bank, and even private banks nowadays, because they're getting tighter and tighter on lending, there's always the moyenne, you know, what's the average income the borrower can show on declared tax statements. So they look at tax returns straight away. You could have a business owner which has a very high and profitable business, but doesn't take a salary or dividend out for many years. From a French banking point of view, that would probably get rejected just because of the paperwork. But the thing they will focus on the most is the salary. You know, it's always the income against the debt. That then gives the endettement, the stress test, which here in France is very important. And then from that stress test, you can work out the mortgage capacity. One of the things that the banks look at as well is the home currency of the borrower. So it brings in Lumon quite well. So if it's a US-based client, they can take 10% off the borrower's income over the last 3 years because of potential currency fluctuations. If it's a UK-based buyer, exactly the same. And if it's a higher risk jurisdiction, which has, you know, high currency fluctuations, for example, a client based in Turkey, then it can be up to 30%. So again, having these conversations early on with a mortgage broker can set out the parameters. Just because on paper they may feel they're very credit worthy, but actually on the tick box exercise of a local French bank, it might not qualify, which is always difficult for a borrower to hear, because in their home country, as a resident, they would feel they're credit worthy. But as a non-resident here in France, the system is very different.
Yeah, it's nothing to do with you, it's to do with the currency that you're buying with more.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's the maximum loan to value available with retail and private banks?
Yeah, so with retail banks, again, it depends on the residency of the borrower. So for a sub €1 million mortgage for a British client, we can get up to 80–85% on a repayment basis. Likewise, on an interest-only basis, there's one mortgage product now whereby we can get up to 70% for a British client. I believe that's our target market on this call today, so it's probably best to mention that. And then with private banks, they typically are a good fit, let's say, for the larger acquisitions. And they have a different business model. So they finance the property up to 100% loan to valuation, subject to the valuation, of course. And then they require financial assets to be pledged on the account, which is essentially their equity in the deal or their relationship part of the deal. Now that can vary from 20% up to 50%. So, and private banks, if I go back to the risk assessment of the borrower, they typically are a good fit for entrepreneurs and business owners who may have, a self-employed status, company owners, because they're deemed, typically more tricky with French retail banks due to the variations and higher risk on the creditworthiness.
Okay.
There's lots and lots to go into, but that's a headline.
Yeah. And we had a question actually that said, so someone said many borrowers anticipate fixed interest rates to drop in the short, medium future. Can I renegotiate the fixed rate during the tenor of loan facility?
So it's a very good question, and it's something which happens, well, it's this question which pops up all the time. The short answer is yes. With some banks we work with, they have like a minimum period of like 2 to 5 years whereby the fixed rate has to remain the same. But then if, for example, the swap rate is reduced by 50 basis points, is a clause you can include, then you have the right to renegotiate. And it really is, it's a very vague clause put in the contract. It is binding, but it's very much based upon how that relationship goes with the bank and the borrower. But you do have the right to negotiate. Not all banks do it, so again, that's the value out of a broker, to make sure, based upon experience, it's the right clause in the right part of the contract.
Okay. And are there any recurring themes in the mortgage market?
Yes, one which is popping up, I wouldn't say daily, but certainly weekly. So 2 years ago, when we had many American buyers buying here in France, they were taking advantage of the dollar, and they were, as I said earlier, making bold offers based upon the cash buyer position. Now, in the US mortgage market, it's very easy to do an equity release. It's a very sophisticated mortgage market. Whereas here in France, one of the sad answers I have to provide to my potential clients is that here in France, if the mortgage value is below, or the property value is below 2 million euros in a non-prime or even prime location, the local French retail banks simply will not do post-financing. The reason why is because there's a 6-month rule here in France on post-financing, and under the Credit Consumer Act, it's a different type of mortgage. It's no longer a Crédit Immobilier, it's more of a regroupment of credits, or it's a post-financing of credit, and it's a higher risk product, and notably for Americans, the product doesn't exist.
Okay.
So one of the questions which happens is, can I do the equity release to then take advantage of the dollar? Because of course they can take money out now and move it back, and they've made 12% year on year just upon a currency fluctuation. And the unfortunate answer is no. So again, speaking to a broker on day one, to have the mortgage on the property, to give you the flexibility to pay down or simply have it, is very important. And many clients totally miss this point. Notaires don't inform them, agents don't know about it, and it can be a very costly position to be in.
Okay. Thank you very much. Liam, so unfortunately Liam has a Christmas party to go to, which I gladly join.
2 minutes of your time, sorry.
You can, no, you can stay with us as long as you like, but thank you so much for joining us tonight. So Jonathan, over to you, talking about currency fluctuation and how can people maybe protect themselves. So at what point, first question for you, at what point should I begin thinking about money transfers and exchange rates when looking to buy a property?
Well, thank you, Emily. Great question, and actually follows on really nicely from the point Liam last made, because in that scenario, if you're having a conversation with us as well, you'd be able to do some quite clever things to fix and lock rates in, so that once you were able to draw down on any funds, you'd know what the exchange rate was in advance. So you'd be able to sort of fix prices well in advance. That's one of the many advantages, but say, just playing on from what Liam said, just really having that conversation quite early. Often I find some clients will leave a sort of detailed conversation with us, maybe until an offer is being accepted or the compromise is being signed. That can actually be too late. The compromise, by the way, is the initial sales contract for buying a French property. And all too often we do see clients leaving it quite late to really consider the currency, because they naturally think, oh, well, that's just to do with when I actually come to buy the property. And, you know, there are some arguments there, but this is really about understanding your options, understanding some of the processes that are involved, so that once you do get to that point, once your offer's been accepted and you've really got to move forward, you're not then going to have to learn lots of new information and make some decisions. You can already have done some of that forward planning so that you can make a bit more of an informed choice. In terms of getting things set up early, it's a very simple registration, and actually it gives you instant access to a Euro wallet. Now this wallet can be used to purchase euros, pay a notaire direct, and it means that you can actually purchase your currency potentially at a more favourable time. Otherwise, you might find that all of a sudden it's all rushed, you've got to pay that deposit. You might end up having to use your bank, which can be quite costly. There could be lots of hidden charges, or you might be forced to buy your currency at not a particularly good time when the market's been moving against you. And again, of course, that would be quite costly. So yes, these are some of the advantages of just having that conversation early, just so you understand some of your options and you don't miss out on a good opportunity.
We did say in previous calls that it could be the difference between a swimming pool or no swimming pool. So yeah.
Very much so. I mean, on that point, if we look at buying euros, France is very popular, as we know, and actually the euro currency has been very popular this year. It's become a lot more expensive to buy euros. If you're talking about €1 million, it's about $130,000 more today than it would have been at the start of the year. If we're talking about €1 million with pounds, it's about £50,000, £60,000 more, because the euro has become more expensive. So I mentioned about sort of fixing rates in advance. That is one option we offer. We had some clients in the summer who were using these forward contracts to fix their rate throughout the duration of the purchase. It's often a bit of a gamble with currency. No one knows exactly what's going to happen. Fortunately, this year the rate has gone downward. That is, by the way, from quite a strong point. As Liam mentioned, the dollar has been trading historically very well against the euro. The pound had been over 120 earlier in the year, so it started in a very good place, but the market has moved against some buyers. So again, having this information and putting some plans in place in advance can really pay off.
Yeah. And do I need a Euro bank account to buy currency?
No, you don't. That's quite a common assumption. Clients are getting to these early stages of, lots of paperwork to sign and, emails with agents and the notaires and perhaps mortgage considerations and these. There's so much going on, but we want to make it nice and easy for you. And often people might think they need to have that French bank account opened to be able to pay the notaire for the deposit because they've got the money in a dollar account or a sterling account or whatever currency they're holding. As soon as you're registered with Liam, you get instant access to a Euro account. So it's very similar to, well, a notaire, a solicitor, anyone who sort of manages money on behalf of clients, sometimes known as escrow accounts or client accounts, a segregated bank account, a Euro account, where you can purchase euros and then hold them until they need to be sent out. And it's very much like your own bank account. You can pay the euros wherever it needs to go to. We have relations with a lot of notaires in France. They're familiar with the Lumon banking arrangements. So we can actually pay your deposit direct to the notaire. It's a very simple process, and it's much simpler and easier for you than sort of fiddling around yourself perhaps with opening the French bank, then trying to get your French bank to pay the money to the notaire. It just simplifies the whole process. So that's a real benefit of this wallet. You can also use the wallet for any other costs that you might need whilst you're getting a French bank account open, perhaps down the line. So if you're buying a car, if you've got furniture to buy, if you want to pay a builder, a plumber, any sort of bank account that you might need to transfer funds into, you can do it all with this Euro account. And as I say, you get instant access as soon as you're registered.
Fantastic. So yeah, it allows people to like take the time to find maybe the bank that they want to bank with, if they even want to bank in France and things like this. So that's great. And we were talking about buying and locking currency. Do you have different contract options available for that?
Yes, thank you, Emily. So I've touched on one already, and I'll start with that one. It's called the forward contract. So this is a arrangement to lock in a price on currency, but to pay for it in the future. A good example is if you think of a sofa or a kitchen. You see the adverts on TV, buy now, pay later. It's that type of arrangement. You lock in a rate on your currency now, you pay a deposit, anywhere from 5 to 10%, sometimes lower. It really depends on the currency, depends how far forward you're going. We can actually fix exchange rates for up to a year. So we just need to find out the amount of currency you want to buy, how far in the future you want to go, and then we can get a price for you. But essentially you pay a deposit, let's call it that 5%. You've then got, say if we're looking at a French property, we're talking a good 3 months from the compromis de vente, the initial contract for purchase. You're going to the acte de vente, usually a 3-month window. So you'd be able to fix your rate in advance. You might have money in the stock market. You might have money in a property that you're waiting to sell to fund the purchase. That really leaves you quite exposed to the currency markets whilst you're waiting for that asset to become cash to buy the currency. So the forward contract allows you to actually fix the rate in for that period of time. Whatever the rates have done by the time you get all the money together at the end of the contract, it doesn't matter, you're locked in at that price. So we had a lot of clients taking those contracts out earlier in the year because there were quite a few forecasts that the euro could struggle. The pound could struggle a little bit towards the end of the year, and also the dollar, and perhaps we'll talk about that a little bit. So these contracts, it's peace of mind and certainty. It almost doesn't matter whether the rate is going to go up or down because no one can fully predict that. It's peace of mind and certainty of knowing what your property is going to cost you when you have to come to purchase it. So that's the forward contract. There's a more basic contract, is called the spot trade, a spots contract. That's where you would have to pay for everything immediately. That's the type of trade we do for your deposit, because obviously you need the money quite quickly. So very simple, you just buy at today's rates and then you pay for your currency. The euros are in the wallet and then you send them out when they need to be sent. Coming on to more slightly complex contracts, but very straightforward and beneficial. We've got the limit order. This allows you to choose a high rate in the market. So often people will come in, they'll pay their deposit and they say, well, look, Jonathan, I'm just going to wait. I've got a feeling the rate's going to go up a bit. They're quite positive the market's going to go their way. That's absolutely fine. It's your decision, but you can use what's called a limit order at that high rate that you're aiming for, to then lock in the trade if the market suddenly gets to that point. So that's quite a clever one to have up your sleeve. And then you've got the stop loss order. That's the opposite of a limit. It's a lower level to protect yourself if the rates start to move against you. You might be on a budget, you don't want to take the risk of the market dropping, but you are really hoping that it could go up. You could use one of these contracts to protect what you have, but you have got the ability to buy if rates go up a bit. So you can use all these contracts together in quite clever ways, and we'll have a long chat with clients about strategy just to see what's going to suit them best.
What's best for people's situation. And very briefly, can you tell us the latest currency forecast for the end of 2025 into 2026?
No trouble. Well, the conditions of this year, I mentioned the scenario really is a much stronger euro in 2025, and a lot of it's to do with interest rates. In the Eurozone, they've been cutting interest rates, but the market now feels perhaps they've nearly finished cutting interest rates, perhaps one more, if not this year, then certainly into the new year. Whereas if we look at the United States and the UK, many more interest rate cuts are forecast, perhaps up to 1% for both economies going into 2026. So what that does is it makes the currency less attractive to investors. And what that does to the forecast is it suggests that going into the new year, that trend may continue. Now, just to be totally clear, no one on this planet can fully forecast exchange rates, because the exchange rate is just a reaction to what is happening in the world. And of course, there's all sorts of things that can happen in terms of politics, trade between nations, other economic factors, of course. But looking at a lot of the forecasts that are out there, and what we do here at Lehman is we look at research and forecasts from about 50 different banks, and we can share this data. It is constantly changing, but it does point to, on both the euro, pound to euro, and the dollar to euro, just a slight bias towards a slightly stronger euro going into the new year. So again, no guarantees on that, but certainly shows the importance of having a proper foreign exchange strategy when you're looking to buy a property in France, so you can make an informed decision and you don't miss out if things are going to go the wrong way.
Thank you very much. Careful what you're saying, you're being recorded.
Always.
No, Jonathan said. Thank you. Tom, I'll come over to you if that's okay. From a taxation perspective, we had loads of questions around taxes. So what are the taxation implications of moving to France?
Oh, that's a big one. I mean, there are lots of potential implications. I mean, I think one of the things that we find is sometimes we encounter people who move to France without doing any planning. They don't necessarily consider income tax, capital gains tax, inheritance tax, and wealth tax, and the rest of it. And by doing that, people can walk into a tax liability that they could very easily avoid if they'd just done some planning. So what we try to do is we try and catch people before they've made the move to France, because that's really the optimum time to do this. And we help them to understand how these various different taxes apply to them. A big one, for example, is inheritance. Maybe we'll cover this a bit later, but the inheritance system in France is completely different to the UK. Also, capital gains tax. If people are selling property in order to fund the purchase of their French property, there's a timing implication there. They might want to consider selling their UK property before they leave the UK, because depending on the exact timing, if they sell the property while they're in France, it could lead to French capital gains tax charge, and potentially also a UK capital gains tax charge. So that's another thing to consider. Then you've got, in France, we have a wealth tax that applies in some situations to property. It depends on the value of property that you own. So we discuss with people how to mitigate against that. You know, again, depending on the situation, it can be possible to avoid that wealth tax. But the good news is that the French tax system, as long as you do things in the right way and in the right order, it can actually be quite favorable. I mean, as I said before, it is very different to the French system is very different to the UK system. But if you do the planning right, and particularly if you organize things in the right way and get the timing right, the French tax system can often be more favorable than the UK system. So we get a lot of people that we speak to are quite surprised about that, because they have this notion that if they move to France, they're going to be paying a lot of taxes. And I think that can be true. It's particularly true for people who are working in France, as you know, some of us on this call will be able to attest to. But in terms of people who are retiring to France, or moving to France but retaining their business interests and their work interests in the UK, it's usually quite a favourable system. But one of the things that we do is we look at this in every individual case, because no two cases will be the same, and we can help people understand how the French tax system is going to apply to them and their particular assets and their income.
Yeah, it was a big question, because as you say, it all depends on the person and their personal circumstances, so answering this type of question can be quite difficult. I was on a webinar, on another webinar to move to another country, and they were saying how important timing wise, not just selling whilst you're in the UK, but also in terms of tax year, because they said depending on what you do and when, you could potentially be taxed in both countries. Is it the same for France?
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, and I mean, yeah, timing is hugely important. We have a lot of people that approach us that they've got not just property, but they'll have various different investments in the UK. And again, if you just move to France without doing any planning on those investments, then you'll walk into a tax liability. Whereas if you do the planning beforehand and do the restructuring while you're still a UK resident, potentially the tax could be zero. So timing is very important. And when people, when our clients are assessing whether they want to become French tax resident, we're ideally placed to be able to help them, because we're essentially impartial, because we operate in both the UK and France, so we can really look at their situation and give them an impartial view as to whether it is a good idea, first of all, for them to become French resident, and then secondly, what's the best way to do it. But I mean, you're absolutely right. Timing is a major part of that. And even once somebody has moved to France, there are still timing considerations when it comes to their asset planning.
So as I said, we'll come to, so we had that question about inheritance tax in France, and the question was, what's the level of inheritance tax when you're in France?
Okay, yeah, well, I think there's two things to consider when it comes to inheritance. I mean, as I mentioned before, the inheritance tax system, or the succession tax system in France, as it's called here, is completely different to the UK. But what France also has is a system of forced heirship. So in the UK, we have testamentary freedom. You can leave your assets to whomever you wish. That's not necessarily the same in France. So if you have children, biological children, then they are considered to be your protected heirs. And it means that if you've got one child, they're automatically entitled to inherit 50% of your estate. 2 children get 2/3, 3 or more children get 3/4 by default. And that can be disadvantageous for the surviving spouse. So this is one of the areas that we look at. So once you've considered the forced heirship rules, and by the way, it is possible to circumvent those forced heirship rules in some situations. But once you've looked at that, then the other thing to consider is tax, which I think is what the question was really getting at. So in the UK, you might be familiar with there's one flat rate of inheritance tax, which is 40%. You have your tax-free allowance, and then beyond that, your beneficiaries are paying 40%. In France, the tax rate depends on who is inheriting and what their relationship is to the deceased, and also the amounts that they're receiving. So, for example, the rate of tax for children in the direct line it goes from between 5% to 45%, depending on the amount. On the other hand, the rate of succession tax for stepchildren, or anybody who is not a spouse and is not a blood relative of the deceased, the rate is basically 60%. I mean, there's a very small tax-free allowance, but it's a flat 60%. So, and that's where people often, fall fall foul of the rules or maybe misunderstand the rules is because they don't necessarily pick up on that. So that's an area that we do a lot of planning with, and as long as you are using the right structure, there is the potential to completely avoid succession tax. It depends on the amount of beneficiaries, the number of beneficiaries and the amount that you're leaving to each beneficiary, but it can be done, and so it really just depends on a case-by-case basis.
So someone asked specifically for a property. So if I own a property in France and I'm a UK citizen or UK resident or a foreigner, that property will fall under French inheritance laws and not my country of origin. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Any French situated property is always going to be taxed in France, and then depending, if somebody's still a UK resident, might also be taxed in the UK as well. But fortunately, you have the double taxation treaty that means you don't necessarily pay tax twice, but you could end up paying a higher rate in either country.
Yeah, fun fact, I tell my mum all the time she can't remove me from the will, so here we go. So last question from a director of a limited company in the UK who maintained her UK office address, and asking the tax efficient way of drawing income in France.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because it's actually a fairly common scenario. So we get a lot of people that approach us about French residency, and sometimes they've already moved to France and they've got a business in the UK. And it can actually be quite favourable, because as long as you are legitimately carrying out that activity in the UK, you're not doing that activity in France, you're entitled to something called a worker's S1. And this is something that Tracy knows a lot about, because we collaborate a lot with Tracy on this area. So you can get something called an S1, and it's from a taxation point of view, it's really favourable, because it reduces or potentially eliminates a liability to social charges depending on what type of income somebody has. So it means that if somebody is in that situation and has dividend income or investment income, then instead of being taxed at the usual rate of 30% in France, it would be taxed at a lower rate of 20.3%. And the other good thing about it is, if you've got that form, that S1, it gets you into the French health system on the back of your UK national insurance contributions. So yeah, I mean, it requires special or specific advice, because you don't want to fall foul of the French rules. You don't want to be getting into a situation where you're perceived as actually carrying out the activity in France, because then the French authorities will look at it and say, well, really, you don't qualify for the S1, and you should be working through a French structure, and you should be paying French social charges. But if you can legitimately show that you're living in France and the activity is over in the UK, then actually overall it has a very positive impact on the situation. So yeah, it's quite a common one, and yeah, we see it a lot.
Last one for me, very quickly. I'm aware of time. It's so interesting. How far ahead do people need to contact you before they decide to move to France?
I think there's no right or wrong answer. I suppose the sweet spot is about a year in advance of the move. I think that's the right time. I mean, we speak to people who are maybe 2 years off a move, and there can be some planning that we can do then. But really, most of the planning is kind of within that year prior to the move. And yeah, and it's just about understanding what a person's current situation is in terms of UK tax liabilities, and then working out how that changes when they move to France. And a lot of people have this misconception that assets they leave in the UK are not going to be taxed in France. I'm afraid that's not the case. It's if you're a French tax resident, you're taxed on your worldwide assets and income, and that's why it's all so much really important for somebody to to do the planning in advance and make sure they get a handle on that.
Right, so people contact Tom a year in advance if you're thinking about moving. Thank you very much. Tracy, over to you. In terms of visa and all this paperwork and admin that people need to do, what are the steps once you arrive in France with your visa?
When you are already in France with your visa, so a little bit of the cart before the horse at this stage, but if you're already in France and you have your visa, the very first thing to do is to validate the visa, because your visa is not valid unless it's being validated online, and many people forget that process because it triggers the immigration procedures behind the scenes, and that's when you'll get your immigration meeting. So the very first thing is that has a cost to it, depending which visa you have, of course. And then, of course, it would be the next, depending on which visa you have. If you have a business, then getting your business created. If it's a non-working visa, then, of course, with the next steps, we get into the healthcare system, exchanging your driving licenses, getting all of the paperwork in process. A bit like Tom was saying, anything to do with moving or relocating to France, it takes a certain amount of time before you come, but it also takes a certain amount of time once you're in France. So turning up with your visa in France is just the first step. And there's a lot of steps to go through to integrate into healthcare, into getting the driving license. It takes about a year once you get into France to integrate quite on a paperwork perspective. I'm not talking about cultural and everything else, but on a paperwork perspective, it takes about a year. And the preparation to move to France or any other country, I would say a year as well.
A year to prepare your move in terms of visa, and then a year to settle once you're in France. So what are the visa options then that people need to consider? Let's say you have some people that would want to carry on working, or you want some people who want to not work. What are the different options?
But yeah, I mean, there is a lot of visa options. Well, I say there's a lot, but there's a few categories of visa options. But let's just say you've got the business visa option. I'm not going to put the salaried visas here because they're a different category, but business visa options and non-working visa options. All visas are applied from country of origin straight away. So if you want to move to France and you want to move to France permanently, or even not permanently, but you want to move to France, you're going to need a visa for longer than 3 months. So if you want to have a business, there are a few options, but the most common option, for example, if you want to be a consultant, say you're already working in the UK or in America or wherever, and you have a transferable skill, then you can come to France on what's called a liberal visa. It's basically an independent freelance type business visa. So again, always applied from country of origin, and that allows you what? It allows you to be able to come into France with a business visa, set up an activity in France and invoice your clients worldwide. Your clients don't necessarily have to be in France, but your business does. There's no such thing as a nomad visa, as Thomas was talking about, people who are working in the UK, but they are working in the UK, they're not working in France. That's possible. Business-wise, it's the same. You might have a business in the UK. You can't come and sit in France and manage it from France without having the appropriate business visa and, of course, the appropriate business setup. And there isn't one rule fits all. And again, that's more about, reaching out to me so I can go through your project and really look at it, dig down deep and say, this is the right visa for you based on that business. There's also talent visas as well. From a business perspective, you can have a business talent visa depending on what you're doing. If you're not going to work, if you're coming over as an early retiree or a retiree, then you've probably heard of the long stay visitors visa. This is a visa really aimed at people who are determined to come in, they're not going to work. I would not advise this visa if you're going to come to France and then a year down the line want to look for a job or want to have a business, because changing a visa to a different type of residency card is complicated. So if you're determined you come in but you're not going to work, so you want to be going for a long stay visitors visa, again, apply from country of origin. It's valid for 1 year. And each year it gets renewed in France online. Difference to the liberal visa, which is valid for 1 year when you first come into France, but when it gets renewed, you get either a 2-year or a 4-year residency card. So obviously, because it's a business visa and you show certain documents at the renewal stage to show that you have an effective business and you have money coming in through that business, depending on what your file looks like, they'll either give you a 2-year or a 4-year. On a non-working visa, because you're not working and because you're not contributing from a financial perspective, then they're going to give you a 1-year renewable visa in France. And so once you're in France, you renew it every year, 4 months before expiry. And I insist on the 4 months because it's really, really complicated if you get it late. And you can do that year. And normally from year 6 renewal, you can request a longer stay residency card. It's completely at discretion of the prefecture whether they'll give that to you, because you are a retiree or a retired person. So that's the 2 main categories, kind of an independent business visa option for those that've got those transferable skills and want to continue working in France remotely for all the clients worldwide, or you've got the non-working visa, of course.
And there was a question about, if I become a permanent resident of France, do I get access to French healthcare and what will I pay?
So anybody who comes to France as a resident, whatever visa you're on, if it's a long stay visa, all get access to the French healthcare system. You may need a private healthcare to come into France with your visa, especially the retirees, unless you've got an S1. But business visas, you don't have to have private healthcare to come in. But once you're in France, then you can apply to the local CPAM. And that allows you to have the same level of healthcare as a French person. It takes quite a while to get into the system. Again, we help you with all of this if you're working with us. It can take anything from 4 to 6 months to get into the French healthcare system, depending what part of France you're living in. So yes, you all get access. Is it straightforward? No. Will it take a lot of time? Yes. I'm not going to go into all the details because I would spend too long. I know the time is running out shortly and we've got poor Alice waiting to answer.
Yes.
questions. So yes, it can. Will it cost you? Yes and no. If you're on an S1, then obviously it costs you a lot less because you have the S1, it's the UK or any other European country paying your healthcare. If you're a retiree, an early retiree who's not receiving state pension, then you're likely to pay the PUMA cost, which is basically your contribution because you're living off investment income. So it's a big subject. And if generally what I do with those type of subjects, we have what's called a residency relocation planning meeting. So when you're at the very beginning and you're ready to talk about this, it's about, what visa do I need? How does it work? What's the documents? How does the healthcare system work? What's the reimbursement rates? Will my illness be covered? How do I get a doctor? How do I do a driving license? So we spend an hour and a half together basically going through the whole process and making sure your project is valid before you go to the next step.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And may I say that everybody will receive the contact details of all the experts, because I think the theme is please contact your expert and ask them as many questions as possible so that you're ready to move. But let's go on to Alice now, and the fun bit of finding the property of your dreams and looking at all these beautiful properties. Alice, I'm sure some people have watched some of our webinars already, but we've got new people joining as well. Could you tell us how long does a purchase take from offer to completion, and what are the key steps involved in that process?
Sure. It is a 3-month process on average. It can sometimes go through slightly quicker, but normally 3 months and sometimes slightly longer. It starts with the agreed offer. That then goes to the notary. It takes probably about 2 weeks to get a preliminary sales agreement ready for signature by both parties, which is in France known as a compromis de vente or a promesse de vente. The buyer then benefits from 10 days cooling off period during which they can actually pull out of the agreement. The seller does not have the same opportunity to do so. He is engaged. And then loan approval, etc., in the following months after that, as well as the preemption right of the town hall, which in France is 2 months, and then acte de vente, which is the final sales agreement, and transfer of funds and keys take place at the end, and that's acte de vente, and that entire process takes around about 3 months on average.
And what are the additional costs that a buyer should budget beyond the property the price of the property?
So the buyer in France pays what is globally called the notary fees. They're not all the fees to the notary. The notary fees, for want of a better description, includes the taxes, the registration fees, and they are around about 7.5% on top of purchase price. So while real estate agent fees are included in the purchase price and generally paid for by the seller, the notary fees are paid above purchase price around about 7.5%.
Okay, 7.5% on top of the purchase price. And are the taxes different from regions to regions?
So the notary fees are not, they're standardized, government standardized. However, the annual taxes that one pays as a property owner in France, which include taxe foncière and taxe d'habitation. So that's the land tax and then as what is now a secondary homes tax. They do in fact differ from commune to commune and are, yeah, really they can differ quite a lot in fact. I mean, just simply between Cannes where I am and Grasse, which is in the hills about 30 to 40 minutes above Cannes, the land tax is at least double in Grasse as what it is in Cannes. So it's really dependent on your local commune and as to what the taxes are. Then, of course, your other annual taxes, if there's wealth tax, for example, which Tom mentioned earlier, which can be mitigated, but if you are paying wealth tax, impôt sur la fortune, for example, of course, that does not change. So any government taxes don't change, but local taxes and land taxes can vary.
Okay. And you mentioned the hills and by the sea, and so how do prices differ between all these areas, between coastal villages, the hills?
So it's a very good question, and it really does differ. I mean, for all the people on the call here, they'll know the coastal areas on the Côte d'Azur, for example, the values are generally quite a bit higher. People pay to be closer to the beach or on the beach, if you will. Having said that, as you move up and away from the coast into the villages, you really get far better value for money. You often get good views. So there's really, I mean, and what I always say to clients is it really comes down to lifestyle choice. Of course, there are different investment options as well, because being on the coast, for example, in a place like Cannes, where the office is based, there are congresses with short-term rental returns, etc. So it really depends on what the client wants, but there is a difference in value from the coast as you go up into the villages and the hills. That is, yeah, it's quite evident, the price differences.
Yeah, and I think that as well, going and seeing it for yourself and actually living it for a bit is so important, because you could say, oh no, I don't want to be in the hills, and actually it's so beautiful there and it's so peaceful, and it's so that you might be surprised actually.
Absolutely. I mean, there are real pluses and minuses to both. And so it's exactly that. I think it's the theme of the webinar is planning. It's come across with absolutely everybody. It really is about understanding the French market when it comes to everything and life here. So yeah.
And talking to your estate agents about the lifestyle that you want, and do you want to be part of the expat community? Do you want to escape the expat community? Do you want peace? Do you want, depending on what you want as well, you know the area so well that you're probably the best place to say, yeah, I know where you should be and where you should go. So yeah. And so at the moment, how is the French real estate market doing?
So it's the good question as well, and I know we're running out of time, so I'll make it brief.
You know what, Jonathan, can we stay a tiny bit longer?
Of course, yeah, we're running.
Here we go.
That's it. Give the people what they want. Let's go.
So let's talk about the market. So It really is. We saw a slowdown 2023, 2024, which I think is evident for many other European countries and worldwide as well. 2025 is interesting. We've seen a stabilizing in terms of prices, and also a very modest but increase in terms of transaction volumes as well that are predicted for 2025. 2024 was the lowest in transaction numbers in France in a long time, with a total of around about 780,000 transactions. Predicted in 2025, we're looking at about 880 to 920. So there is a modest increase in transaction numbers. If we compare that to 2021, where we were at 1.2 million transactions, it's a big difference, but there's a slight increase that we're seeing happening. So, you know, buyers always ask, you know, is now the time to buy? And I would personally say that being the bottom of the market, we might have touched. And looking into 2026, I think transaction numbers will continue to rise, and then, of course, the same thing happens. Prices will start to rise again as well. So the market, you know, it's not a flamboyant market with regards to, or in comparison to 2021 and 2022, but there's modest and interesting growth that we're seeing in the numbers. So it's positive.
So in terms of a UK resident thinking about buying in France, would you say that at the moment there is a fair amount of stock and there might be some deal to be had before the market picks up again, and then suddenly buyers may fight again for properties?
I would definitely say so. There is stock available. There, you know, sellers are coming to a point, those that may not have sold yet, where they might be a little bit more negotiable on price. But I don't think that's going to last for too much longer, or at least we're going to start to see increases in transactions, decreases in stock, and pricing starting to slowly increase. We're already seeing that, in fact.
Okay. And I'm going to ask one last question to everyone. I thought it was an interesting question, which is, what are the pitfalls to avoid? So maybe choose one that you could think of. Alice, you seem to have thought of one, maybe.
You know, it's a question that always comes up. What are the pitfalls? And at the risk of sounding too kind of glass half full, I don't really think there are pitfalls if you plan. So again, we've all said exactly the same thing. If you don't plan and if you're not prepared, then yes, there are pitfalls, and plenty of them everywhere. But in any market and in any country, if you plan in advance, if you take advice from Tom, from Jonathan, from Liam, from Tracy, from myself, early on, those pitfalls are really minimized and potentially none, in my personal view. Glass half full.
Glass half full. Thank you, Alice. Tracy.
Yeah, I guess, you know, we're all repeating the planning. I think that's all agreed on that, and I think everybody watching this evening or on replay will be planning their move to France. If I have to think of a pitfall from a paperwork perspective, not necessarily from a property, because I think the property, you know, it's the dream, it's the wonderful part of your project. The paperwork is less sexy. So from a pitfall perspective, I would say, don't think just it's easy, because it's not. Tell people to think, oh, it can't be that complicated. And that's when it goes wrong, unfortunately. So the pitfall for me is probably a lack of preparation and thinking how, you know, moving to France means finding your dream home and that is it. Unfortunately, I wish it was that, but it isn't. So it's a little bit more preparation and realizing that you don't know what you don't know, and don't listen to social media, because half of it is absolutely not good. The forums don't have all of the information, and that you need, it's extremely generic and doesn't relate to everybody's situation. So yeah, forums be careful of, because you might listen to something that actually is more complicated than your situation, or you know, you might put it out of context for me. So forums are a big no-no.
In the end, it's your hard-earned money and you want to protect it and make sure you're doing the right thing, so talk to the specialist. Tom.
Yeah, I mean, as Alice said, planning is really important. I think, I don't know if it's necessarily a pitfall, but you know, one of the things we see is people not really, you know, they don't learn French. It definitely pays to learn French, I think, if you move into France, at least at some level, so you can communicate and get by. And it really does make it much more of an enriching experience. I think another one, quite a modern pitfall, is relying too much on AI, ChatGPT and the like for information. I think that these are great tools and they're very good at sort of you know, scraping the internet and getting the relevant facts in front of people. But what they're not so good at doing is applying that to your situation. So I think that's really where taking advice from Blevins Franks and all the other people on this panel will really help people.
Jonathan.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, I'd really agree with Tom's point there about information on the internet, etc., and the value of a conversation with a specialist. Luckily, AI is not going to take over all of our jobs anytime soon, we would hope. You know, the AI has come along, and it's done this throughout the years. We've had, you know, computers. Everyone thought that was going to get rid of accountants and lawyers because everything we've done with a computer. It hasn't. It's enhanced the work of specialists, and hopefully that's how AI can complement the value of what we do, but not overtake us. And so that conversation with the actual specialist is very valuable. I'd say pitfall is, from an exchange rate point of view, assuming rates are going to go up. Not everyone does this, but a lot of people come into this and think, I'm just going to wait for the rate to go up. And it sounds so simple and so straightforward. It doesn't work. If it was easy to trade the markets, you know, everyone would be doing it and making lots of money, and the market's very difficult to predict. So just, yes, again, that conversation with a specialist so you can understand what you're doing, and then you can make an informed decision.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone. I know that we went a bit longer, but you know, it's all so interesting. So thank you very much. Merci beaucoup à tous. Managed to say something in there. And for everyone listening, you will receive a recording. You will receive the contact details for all the experts. So please do contact them and make sure that you're preparing your move to beautiful France. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.